much to talk about, and with our guys standing by, we get right to the NFL and the AFC. Because here's the deal. It's winning you're in the AFC. And let's start with the Titans. 10-5, they clinched the AFC South with a win versus the Texans or a Colts loss. Now, independent of that result, by the way, the Dolphins clinch a playoff berth with a win in Buffalo. They can also clinch with a loss by any one of these three teams, the Colts, the Browns, or the Ravens. Baltimore is another 10-5 team, scrapping for the postseason. They've been strong so far in the last 4 weeks at least, but with a win in Cincinnati, they're in, or they need losses by Cleveland or Indianapolis. And the Browns are looking to make the playoffs for the first time since 2002. They need to win against Pittsburgh or a Colts loss or a combination of Baltimore, Indianapolis, and Miami winning as well as a Titans loss. A lot to sort out there. And look at the Cleveland Browns, their odds right there to reach the wild card. They're at 58%. To win the division, it's 16%. And to go all the way to the conference championship, that's 3%. That's according to our FPI. So, we start off with Adam Schefter talking about the Cleveland Browns. Now, Adam, Cleveland reopened their facility for practice on Wednesday afternoon after closing it earlier in the day to conduct contact tracing. What's the latest there?
Ryan, problematic. It reopened yesterday afternoon, as you mentioned, and now they will go and see if it's spread. But I think the tests last night would be key to see if there's further spread. Now, we go back to this past weekend. The Browns' entire wide receiver unit was essentially wiped out, and they headed to New York for a big game against the Jets where they didn't have their wide receivers that they needed. Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashard Higgins, Carter L. Hodge. So they were missing some key players. Now, yesterday, there were more positive tests that turned up. And so they're hoping that the virus has been contained, but they should get further clarity as the week goes on. And wouldn't that be something to go through an entire NFL season without a single cancellation, only to have its playoff schedule on the final weekend of the season be disrupted somehow with the events in Cleveland? The Browns are hoping that's not the case. The NFL is hoping that's not the case. But I can tell you that everybody is closely monitoring the events in Cleveland as they're unfolding now.
And Adam, with last week and now what's happening now, I have to think the concern level's pretty high there.
Oh, there's no question, Ryan. Listen, the NFL's come really far. And the last thing the league and the Browns want, especially when the Browns are on the cusp of their first playoff appearance in almost 2 decades, is to have something spoil it at the end. And again, they're trying to see if this is contained. We should have further answers the rest of this week.
All right, Lewis, I want to turn to you. Lewis Neek joining us now. All right, so Big Ben out on Sunday. What are your thoughts on this being a must-win for Baker and the Browns?
Oh, look, this is games that they have had in years because their playoff life hangs in the balance and they can control their own destiny with a win here. And when you look at it without Ben Roethlisberger playing in this football game, the last thing that this team wants to do, provided that they are able to have their full complement or something close to their full complement of wide receivers, is to lose a game with a lot on the line. This is exactly what people are looking for from the Browns, for them to win the big games when it matters the most, when there's a lot at stake. The last time I saw them in person, obviously, was that game against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football, and they came up just short. But people thought, and I thought, that they had turned the corner at that point, that they understood that now it really has shifted from hope to expectations. People expect this football team to be good. So if Jarvis Landry is able to play, Kadero Hodge is able to play, Rashard Higgins is able to play, Donovan Peoples-Jones is able to play, Jedrick Wills, he's practicing. Wyatt Teller, one of their best offensive linemen, he's practicing. If they're at full strength, I expect them to win this football game and would be very disappointed. I think a lot of people would be let down if they don't, considering everything that's on the line.
Yeah, and you talk about going from hope to expectations. That's all shifted in a matter of weeks, if not just this season. So, Neek, let's say they're at full strength. What do they need to do in order to win this game?
Well, I mean, I think it's obvious. There's no secret that the Cleveland Browns offense is predicated on how well they run the ball. So they need to get back to doing that. It's not a very modern way to think about football, but a lot of the best offenses, especially when you have a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, who is very, very good when things are going well and not so good when when there's too much pressure on him. I think it's important to establish that running attack, build the play action off of it, and let Baker get comfortable because you're probably going to need him in late stretches in the game. Even though the Steelers are not putting their best effort out there necessarily, not putting their best players out there, and probably aren't even game planning to the degree that they would if this was a must-win game like it is for the Browns, you're still going to get the Steelers. And the Steelers are still going to play hard. They still have a lot of great talent on offense and defense. So Baker's going to have to make some plays late in the game. You just don't want to ask him to make too many early in the game.
Adam, I see you chomping at the bit. Jump back in.
Well, what's interesting here is that as difficult a situation as this is for the Cleveland Browns, the Browns couldn't ask for any better timing on the schedule. The NFL basically gift-wrapped it to them for the holidays. Jets last week, and they couldn't capitalize. And the Pittsburgh Steelers at the absolute right time when the Steelers haven't gotten a bye this year due to the COVID crisis, and they had to basically go through their season without getting the bye they wanted, and will basically use this game as an unofficial bye to rest players like Ben Roethlisberger and some of their other players. And so if you're the Cleveland Browns and ever need to play the Pittsburgh Steelers and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is the time and this is the week to do it. They're trying to make it easy for Cleveland.
That's a great point. I mean, this is their time. They didn't have that bye all that time. Now they've got the time to rest, and this is the time where Cleveland really has to try to pull it out. We will see what happens there. Guys, let's talk about the Bucs, because this was another thing that passed on yesterday. That was incredible. The Bucs clinched the playoff. Coach Bruce Arians, that's not even nearly enough. Could it be Super Bowl or bust for Tom Brady and Tampa Bay? Take a listen to Bruce Arians. It's Super Bowl or bust. That's the goal every year. And you can't get to the Super Bowl if you can't get to in the playoffs. So that's been huge for us. It's Super Bowl or bust. That's the key part of that quote here. Bring back the guys. Lewis, what do you think? Is Arians right? Is it really Super Bowl or bust for the Bucs?
Yeah, I believe it is. Look, Tom Brady at this point in his career is not someone who you're looking at as a 3, 4, 5-year project type of situation where you have that amount of time in order to get a culture and the football team turned around and headed in the direction of Super Bowl contention. This was something that his acquisition, his signing down there, in addition to all the other acquisitions that they had to make as far as fortifying the offensive line with the drafting of Tristan Wirfs in the first round to play right tackle, the bringing in of Rob Gronkowski, the late season acquisition of Antonio Brown. These are all things that, combined with the fact that they had a young defense that was on the come in 2019, has had its ups and downs, but has a lot of big-time explosive playmakers on the defensive side, on that side of the ball. All that coming together equaled, look, they wanted to challenge for a division title, which they weren't able to win. Goes ahead and captures that. But this is still one of these situations where it is still about getting to the big game there in their home stadium. Otherwise, what was the point of Tom going down there? What was the point of them kind of building this roster in this way? Of course, they're looking to the future as well with some of the young players. But for 2020, it was about getting to the big game. And if they don't get there, there's no question this is a letdown for this organization and this football team.
Nick, what do you think?
I mean, I agreed with and disagreed with what Arians was saying, because obviously for the Pats, it's Super Bowl or bust for all the reasons that Lewis just laid out. But it's not true that for every season, for every team, for every season, that it's Super Bowl or bust. I think he was trying to soften it a bit there. We just came off a segment where we're talking about the Browns. This is an overwhelming success for the Browns, especially if they get into the playoffs. The Bucs situation is different. All those guys that came in, you have a 43-year-old quarterback. You are not putting all this together, and I promise you that Bruce Arians was not interested in bringing in AB unless somebody said, look, this is going to help us win the Super Bowl. I guarantee you that's the pitch that made Bruce Arians comfortable with bringing AB back into a team that he's on.
Schefter, weigh in.
Well, a couple things. I think Lewis touched on it. This is a chance to make history. No team ever has played a Super Bowl in its home stadium as Tampa has the chance to do, whether it can get done. And when you ask whether this is Super Bowl or bust, let's make this very simple. Any season that Tom Brady plays now for a team is Super Bowl or bust. That's it. That's the deal. Because for all we know, this is it. Again, he's given no indication that this is his last season, but any one of these years could be his last year. So as long as Tom Brady is your quarterback, that year is Super Bowl or bust. And if he comes back next year will be Super Bowl and bust. And if he comes back the year after, it'll be Super Bowl and bust then. Every year Tom Brady's your quarterback is Super Bowl or bust.
So, Schefter, let me ask you this. What is, you're talking about every year being Super Bowl or bust. What is the shelf life of this team? If they don't get it done this year, if they don't get it done next year, how long do they try to run this back?
To me, the shelf life is as long as Tom Brady is playing quarterback because he's still playing at a high level and there's still a tremendous amount of talent all around him. And as long as Tom Brady's there, talent is going to want to go to Tampa to join him. As long as he keeps playing and keeps playing at the level he's at, that's how long the shelf life is. It might be another 2 years. Look, he signed a 2-year contract to begin with. So the only thing that we know for sure is that he gets and they get 2 years of each other, this year and next year. Then if you want to talk about the expiration of shelf life, the milk going bad, the food in the refrigerator smelling, whatever you want, Ryan, that all is in play at that point in time. But right now, it's this season and next season, and we go from there.
Wonder what it does smell like in that refrigerator. All right, fellas, thank you so much. We'll talk about this more when we come back. But we got to talk about college football because we are just 1 day away from the college football playoff. In the nightcap, Ohio State's going to take on Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, a rematch of last year's Fiesta Bowl. Clemson is a 7.5-point favorite, though our Football Power Index views the game as a virtual coin flip. In the early game, it's Notre Dame and Alabama. In the granddaddy of them all, Alabama's favored by 20 points, which would be the largest point spread for a game in the history of the college football playoff. So let's talk this over. Welcome in our guys, Desmond Howard, David Pollack. David, I'll start with you. Alabama is nearly a 3-point touchdown favorite for a reason. What, if any, weakness is there for Notre Dame to exploit?
Well, if you've seen Alabama this year, if you just watched the SEC championship game, 10 days, 11 days ago, and they gave up a lot of points. And when you look at this defense, they're not as dominant as they've been in the past. You think about the Jaron Reeds and Mount Cody's and Jonathan Allen and Quentin Williams and all those guys on the interior. They don't have that guy. So I think it's, a defense that's given up more explosive plays against good offenses. So if I'm Notre Dame and Ian Book, keep that offense off the field. I don't have a solution for the other side of the football, okay? You're not stopping Mac Jones, Devontae Smith and company. But if you don't give them the ball, then maybe you're saying maybe there's a chance.
It's the only thing. Just keep them off the field. So, Des, what impact do you expect Alabama wide receiver and Heisman finalist Devonta Smith to have in this game?
I expect him to have a big impact. I mean, he's the AP Player of the Year, which is unheard of for a player in his position. And he can do everything at the wide receiver position. He can run slants, he can go deep, he can run intermediate routes. He's great after the catch. He has a huge catching radius. He's just a tremendous talent. And I just don't see anybody on their secondary that can really stick with him man to man. Actually, they will be quite foolish to try to man up number 6, Devontae Smith. So I think he's going to have a huge impact. They're going to have to roll the coverage to him, give him a lot of attention, which then they have another guy, John Mechie III, on the other side, who is explosive too. So you have to kind of like pick your poison when you're going up against this Alabama offense.
They got to find some way to neutralize it. So, David, Notre Dame's recent track record in the big games, it obviously speaks for itself. So I ask you, obviously they're playing to win, but what else do you feel like they're playing for tomorrow?
I get a kick out of this Notre Dame question. They're playing to show they belong. Who are you going to put in this 4th spot that's going to give them a game? We're going to be asking the same question, whether this is Texas A&M, whether this is Cincinnati, whether this is Georgia. It's Notre Dame. Congratulations. They've had an awesome season. Whoever you put here was going to get boat raced regardless. So I don't look at this and say, what does Notre Dame have to do X, Y, and Z? They're in the playoff. Good job. Great season. They beat Clemson. They beat North Carolina. I don't look at it under that lens. I think anybody that was in this spot would have a long day against number 1.
Well, let me ask you this way. What happens if they go in this game, get blown out by 30, 35, 40? What does that say about their credibility?
It's the same thing that happened to A&M when they played them. They lost by 28. Georgia lost by double digits. Listen, you want them to show up for sure. And they have to play better than they did against Clemson. They have to play better than they did against Alabama in the BCS championship back in, I think, 2012 or whenever it was. Of course, you'd like to say on a big stage they came and brought it. I get a kick out of this because 1 versus 4 doesn't typically go well regardless. So I think it's unrealistic expectations. If you put Clemson and Ohio State up against Bama right now, I think Bama would be a prohibitive favorite. Just now you look at the 20-point spread and you're like, dang, that's a lot of points in a semifinal. But Notre Dame had a great season. I don't discount what they did this season because they're probably going to lose to Alabama.
Well, Des, so thinking about that, do you think we hold Notre Dame to an unfair standard when we compare them to the likes of Alabama and Clemson?
Listen, David danced all around that question, man. I didn't know he could two-step like that, but check this out. Notre Dame is a blue blood program, right? The expectations there before this season was championship or bust. Why? Before this season, they were an independent team. Now they're an ACC team. But still, when you're talking about you bringing a guy like a Brian Kelly, you know, he's one of the best coaches in college football. The expectations are high. They don't care what happened to A&M. They don't compare themselves to the Aggies. They're Notre Dame. They're the Fighting Irish. They're supposed to be in this position. As a matter of fact, they believe they belong here, and they're going to go out there and give their best effort. I think you should expect the best anytime you see the Golden Domers line up because of who they are, because of their history, and because of the talent level they're supposed to bring in and year out. And they want to be respected with the Alabamas, with the Clemsons, with those teams that have won national championships recently. They're not just happy to be here. They understand this is their opportunity to show everybody in the college football world that they belong on this big stage. I hope they show up.
Okay, so David, let's go with that. What, if any, is the path for Notre Dame here to pull the upset?
Well, I hear Dez, and Dez played a little bit earlier on than I did in football. Obviously won the Heisman back in, I think, 90-something. But that I think Dez is still in the 90s with that because Notre Dame ain't been relevant for a long time like that. Listen, when we talk about national champions every year, there's two teams that expect that. It's Clemson and Alabama. Like everybody else, yeah, Ohio State gets there. Ohio State is always in the mix. Other teams that have been in the mix